Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Julia. I was an admission officer at Haverford College, an outside reader for Emory University, and I currently work at Milton Academy, an independent boarding and day school outside of Boston, Massachusetts.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. This week in the news, an article in the Wall Street Journal, Seeking College Admission Edge, More Kids Seek a Gap Year by Alex Janin. Our bonus content this week, I'll be discussing with Lisa, what is it that keeps admission officers up at night? And our interview is the last part of my interview with Sue Corner, Dean of Admissions at Willamette University, understanding Willamette University. Okay, friends, I'm back here with Julia Esquivel. You must not have been too bad of an experience here. You would have quit. You wouldn't be back for round two.
Yeah, I'll try one more time, maybe.
We hope it's a lot more than one. All right, we're going to jump in right away, and we're going to start out with our admissions tip. And because I have so much talent on our team right now, I've reached out to our team and said, I don't need to do all these tips. What about you? So, Julia, take our tip away for us today.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. So a lot of the questions I'm getting right now as a high school counselor is from my students, and it is, hey, Ms. Esquivel, I could do this over the summer, I could do this over the summer, or I could do this over the summer. What is my best option in terms of what makes me most appealing on my college app in terms of how I use my summer? I'm thrilled that you have so many options, but I actually really don't like that question because you have the answer yourself, which is you should choose the experience that feels most meaningful to you and not about the outcome of how it might look to a college. Especially for privileged students, you often have maybe parents or guardians that can support you to take an online summer course or an in-person summer course, or maybe they help you network and you can shadow one of their friends, things like that, maybe some fancy internships. I've had students who have these really incredible resumes because of these experiences that they've had exposure to. And they've not gotten into their dream schools. And I've had students who worked at TJ Maxx for the summer and did get into their dream schools. So I think it's really important for you to consider what you'll get the most out of. I think especially when we think about real world skills, or a real job can be really helpful. And honestly, that can mature you a lot more than maybe interning in a lab or taking a extension school course or something like that. But basically, as long as you're spending your time in a meaningful way, that's what matters the most to colleges. And they can see through these things. So they know when you're being authentic and when you're not. And it's also not fair. It's an equity issue, right? So if you had all of my students who are coming to the college process with some fancy looking summer experiences on their resume, colleges know that that's usually a function of exposure and access and privilege. So it wouldn't be fair to the students who don't get those kind of opportunities to no fault of their own. So please choose your summer experience that maybe means the most to you, you think you'll get the most out of in terms of your life, as well as if you need to make a little money, now is the time to do so.
I absolutely love that. And now I need to tap into all our talent for admissions tip, because it may be the most frequently asked question that I've get. Certainly, if I go back to you get it just all the time. And it does make sense. You know, something that when I talk to folks on the admission side, and anyone who heard my interview with MIT knows this, I think sometimes they don't get the fact that people are trying to get in because they just don't like that at all.
Right.
But that is human nature. You are trying to get something. Just like if somebody's trying to get a job, they probably think what will help me get the job. Like that is the mindset that they're in. But I find when it comes to the summer, there's this, the implication there is that there's secret magic bullets or some things count way more than others. And you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I'd love you to talk a little bit more, Julia, about how sort of on the admission side, how you can see through either pretense or like privilege, like when someone has amassed all kinds of opportunities that clearly they were able to use their resources for, how it doesn't how you guys put that in context and it doesn't necessarily read down to their benefit.
Sure. I think a lot about my high achievers, especially in this category, because they've got probably all the goods when it comes to how their transcript looks. Maybe they have some scores they're happy to report. And so then the next question is, what else do I do to try to get an edge? And I would say a lot of those students might have, I shadowed a doctor for a few weeks. I took a Harvard Extension School course on epigenetics. I also did some data analysis for one of my dad's friends who works in public health or something like that. And then when the students go to write about this, maybe for a supplement, or maybe they're in an interview setting and somebody asks them how they spent their summer, it reads like a book report almost. They just explain what they did. You can't really find the meaning behind it all. Now that's really different from maybe a student who is really interested in being a pre-med student who really likes CRISPR and somehow got to take a few extra courses that, again, unfortunately with the summer programs, most of them are rather expensive, and it's just your ability to pay that allows you into the course, which colleges know. So maybe that student had a real passion and wanted to know more about CRISPR. Their high school doesn't teach genetics, doesn't teach these higher level biological concepts. That essay or that interview response is going to come out a lot more authentic when they talk about all the things they were exposed to that they wouldn't normally get exposed to, and how they're looking forward to continue that in college. Where I think some students who think, I just got to check these boxes, let me find some experiences that sound really fancy. They don't really get a lot out of it. Maybe they were fetching coffee most of the time. maybe it was just a 2-day experience and they didn't get a lot out of it. A lot of the time when you have these nice internships, you're actually not really exposed right alongside to the person that you're working with or the work that they're doing. So being able to sort of really show how that fits into what you're passionate about or how you're curious or what you help to do to change the world is going to come out in those answers. So great if maybe your experiences do feel like that fancy resume, but they're authentic to you. But it's really clear, I think, on the college side and on my side as a high school counselor, when you've gotten something out of that. One of my favorite essays, actually a student ever wrote, was this is a student of a lot of privilege. They decided to be a busboy for a summer, and they got exposed to people they would never have met from all different ages, all different walks of life, all different backgrounds. They got to put their Spanish speaking skills to use. And in fact, that's what they want to do for the rest of their summers in college, is they want to go back there. They felt like they found this great community. They have no interest in the restaurant business, no interest in cooking, anything like that. And you could just tell that they really got a lot out of that experience, and it really opened their eyes to more in the world. And that actually landed really well with the colleges. I got a lot of feedback from colleges saying that they really admired that the student had a lot of the resources to do something, what sounded fancier or maybe, quote, more impressive. And actually, it landed really well in the colleges because the student came out with some worldly experience and wisdom that they wouldn't have gathered at the age of 17 without that experience.
Oh, great anecdote. And I have to throw a question I get asked a lot is it worth it to go to like Brown's summer program? I'm sure you get that one a lot, right? Like, so for those of you who don't know, a lot of universities, they want to use their facilities during the summer when they're not at max capacity to generate revenue. So they use their brand name and they outsource these summer programs to, not even things that are run through Brown or Brown's admission office, and I'm just picking Brown because Brown's got a one that seems to be very popular, but lots of schools have these. And a lot of people think it's kind of their edge, like to go and get on that campus and have that, and that'll be their in on admission. Did you see in your admissions experience quite a few people who had something like that on their activities, or did you come across that, or do you come across it now on the counseling side?
Yes, we come across it on all ends. So usually when they're planning their summers, oh, should I do Brown summer? Should I do Wake Forest summer? Which one's better? And then also after the summer experience is complete, usually parents and students ask me to send the transcript from maybe some of the classes they took. It does not give you an edge. And yes, you might be taught by a Brown professor. That is possible. Or you might be exposed to students you would never have before, and that's really exciting. But in terms of the college process, it does not give you an edge. And at the end of the day, it's really most of the time a paid for experience. So somebody who has the ability to pay for it can usually do so. And it also depends on your high school, right? I work at a very well-resourced high school, but maybe there is something that you really want to know more about. Maybe you are curious about living away from home and want to try that out. Maybe you want to know what it's like to take a couple classes on a college campus. That's all a good reason to take those summer programs, but it is not a good reason just to take them because you think it'll give you an edge on your applications. Unless you're really interested in it, I would say save some money and find something that really feeds your passion. And a lot of the times, these professors that you might have, they might be tenured faculty, they might not be, and they do offer to write a letter of recommendation a lot of the time. I will tell you that I've not known a single time where that letter of recommendation has changed anything for the student in the process. So even though they might have a letter being written by a faculty member of that college, it does not give them an edge in the process.
Say, Julia, we only get you once a month, so I got to jam multiple tips in when we get you. But I'm really glad that you brought up the point that not trying to disparage them and say that there's not some value, like living away from home could be a great value. Finding out if you like that city or like the surrounding area, meeting new people. But it's more the admission edge piece, which is normally how people approach us when they ask the question, is it worth spending like 5 figures for this opportunity to get an admission edge? And so that's the point we're hammering home. Awesome. Well, I'm also going to tap into Julia here in our admissions vernacular is the term yield protection. So Julia, that's a fairly common one. Some of ours are more obscure. I'm sure you've probably come across that term. How do you hear that used?
Yes. So I've heard it a few times, and different schools might call it different things, maybe not even name it, but it's a practice that they use, which is essentially that maybe you're an applicant to a school where you are registering in the top 1%, top 10% of their applicants, that you're a shining star for them. And because of the selectivity of the school, maybe it's not in that most selective band. They are pretty sure you might get an offer from a more selective school, and therefore they don't admit you and maybe they waitlist you. I have seen students denied for that reason too, because the college realizes they're just never going to come here. So why should I sort of use a spot on a student that's never going to say yes? And that way it can also help the college sort of predict what might happen. So if you're going to admit, let's say 20,000 students, don't make 5,000 of those students that might never come. And then you get nervous about your wait list and those numbers there. So a lot of the times I see this when I do maybe a counselor call. There's very few colleges these days that do allow for this, but I'll be on a call with a college that maybe admits 41% of their applicants. And I have a student that is likely to get good news at maybe an Ivy League, right? So that school will usually waitlist that student of mine or deny them and then say to me, well, they're not coming here. And so usually I just double check when they tell me if they're not reading as strongly, we're not looking to admit them. And this is where demonstrated interest is important to pay attention to. So there are colleges that will still use yield protection without demonstrated interest. They just use metrics and data from prior years to guess if that student would enroll or not. But for especially, I worked at a small liberal arts college where it's very important you get your numbers very small and very correct. So if we saw a student who was super, super strong academically, super strong personally, but had never been to campus, hadn't interviewed, we were pretty sure we were probably the safety option for the student and they were not likely to enroll. So we would maybe waitlist that student.
Yeah, in fact, one of your successors, after you moved on, he would just flat out tell people, we're talking about Haverford College, if you live within a 150-mile radius and you don't interview, don't expect to get in here.
Yep, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Which was an example of yield protection. The thinking being, and I'm really glad, Julia, you went into different nuances of it, right? So sometimes it's done strictly off metrics. So schools have data galore, and they can know that we rarely get this kinds of kid. Like, we know who we're competitive with, and we just rarely get a kid with that profile. We can tell where this kid's going to get in, and we do not have a good success record competing with XYZ schools where this kid's going to get in. And so that's like what you're referring to when it's not always linked to DI. Sometimes it's linked to just metrics and data. And then other times it's linked to that engagement piece, whether you did the interview or all the other things, virtual, attended, just all kinds of different things, which we talk about a lot and won't get into too much here, but just what your engagement level has been. And that can be also things like, did you write a good supplement? Right?
Yep.
You want to talk about that for a sec?
Absolutely. This is actually what I hammer home the most with my students is, yes, pay a lot of attention to your Common App essay, but almost always when it came down to a tough decision for me in admissions, when I was on the other side of the desk, between a waitlist and an admit, or sometimes a waitlist and deny, it really would be the supplements, because now you're looking for fit. So let's say you've got, this doesn't really happen, but let's say you've got two identical applicants and you've got room for one of them, right? If somebody wrote a better supplemental essays or a better supplemental essay, it shows me that that person was being really thoughtful and trying to articulate their match with my college. I'm going to be more excited to admit that person because it's probable that we might get them. Whereas the other person might just have written a stock supplemental essay, especially the ones that I can always, if I took out the name of the college and put another one back in and it still rang true, it's not super thoughtful. Most colleges, I would hope, have good professors and good resources and an econ major, things like that. So certainly the supplement is often a big decider when it comes to, are you going to be tipped in or are you going to be tipped out?
So you know what? I feel like I'm preaching this all the time, by the way. Those college-specific essays, custom questions, they count so much for those who have them. But I feel like we probably opened a little bit of Pandora's box here, because you can imagine an applicant listening to this and thinking, wait a minute, I was told to build my college list to have some probables on there, so that I don't get shut out. And now you're telling me that a school can look at me and say, oh, we may not get you. I thought these were I don't like to use the term safety school, as you know, unless the school admits by numbers, but these were like my probables are high probables. So how am I supposed to build a college list if the schools I put on that I think are my probables are high probables, the school's going to turn around and waitlist or deny me because they think I'm not going to come? So what's your advice to that? Because that's not an easy question, is it?
No, it's not. I will say this. I've not seen it work out badly for some students. So I'm thinking about one student I had who is a pretty high flyer, did miss at the most selective schools, Ivies, the Dukes, the Northwesterns, but did get into just slightly less selective than that and was waitlisted at even less selective schools. And so in the end, it was true. They were more likely to pick Boston University or University of Virginia over this particular school they were waitlisted at that admitted about 53% of their applicants, right? So even though I'll say this, it did hurt my students' feelings, and they were sort of like, what did I do wrong? And I was like, nothing, you did too much right, actually. But it did work out for that student. So, and that was a particular school that does not measure demonstrated interest. What I would say for a couple of things is that you got to do you have to show up even in your probable or least selective options as if it's your most selective option. So if you put in a lot of effort to that application, then you're going to give yourself the best chances possible. And actually, colleges that might be less selective will really appreciate when you put a lot of time into that and are going to be more apt to say yes to you instead of maybe waitlist you. The other thing to think about is certainly if the school does measure demonstrated interest, please do jump through the hoops, do what you can. And in the event that you do end up on a wait list, what I kind of like about the wait list territory is we've removed some of these barriers. So you're able to make a case for yourself at most schools and say, yes, keep me on the wait list, which already shows to the school that you're interested, even if they didn't measure demonstrated interest. So if you join a wait list at a school that was a probable school for you, then they might be, oh, great. If we're going to go to the wait list, we're going to start with our, really top kids that we waitlisted. So and then you can also reach out oftentimes to your rep or write a letter of continued interest. And we hope that there's space off the wait list, but there's things you can do to articulate to a college after they've made a decision if you're on the wait list and you're a strong applicant, that you did have an interest in being admitted and potentially attending. But I've actually seen it mostly work out. I've never seen a really, really strong student just get denied across the board at probables. Especially think about maybe your state school, maybe think about public universities, larger universities. Those are schools that are going to have a little more wiggle room to be able to say yes to a student, no matter what their interests might be or their ability to yield you might be. So there's going to be some schools out there that maybe aren't so sensitive to yield protection that won't give you a decision based on their thoughts on if they're going to get you or not.
No, that's fantastic, because I was going to add a couple of things. I like to see students have 3 probables, not 2, just to play it safe. And I was going to say, if you're working with somebody guiding you in your college list, this is a great question to be asking them. What's been your experience with these schools on my probable list when it comes to just waitlisting or denying somebody strictly because they think they're too strong? But if you're not working with somebody, you don't have professional guidance, what the last thing Julia says is really important. You don't see this enacted as much with public schools as you do with private. A lot of time, your public schools, your state schools, that's my experience, Julia. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. They could care less about the school group or who they're going to get. They will throw marinade at you, even if you'll never attend.
Yeah. So if you don't have guidance and you're stressed out by this, make sure that you have some good public schools in your probable bucket, and you should be fine, because the whole yield protection thing, a lot of it is the private schools. And there's a few reasons for that. One, a lot of them are smaller. So they have to be very careful about over enrollment, under enrollment, where bigger schools have a lot more summer meld. It's easier for the numbers to work. And then also a lot of times these are schools that are trying to build their brand. And one way you build your brand is by driving down your acceptance rate, right? But you're trying to bring in the most gifted and talented, well-rounded students in accordance with your institutional priorities, while at the same time having the lowest acceptance rate. And so the combination of that and not wanting to over-enroll or under-enroll is often what makes the private schools a lot more sensitive to this. Where the public schools, they're kind of a mission to serve the public good. They're not necessarily as brand conscious about quote unquote moving up in the proverbial pecking order and driving down their admit rates. And they just have enough numbers that they just can make it work between all the people starting the summer, leaving, moving out, transferring, that they're not as concerned about over enrolling and where do we put the people and where are they going to stay? Do we have to rent a hotel out? Would you agree with all that?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, see, we gave our listeners a taste of how when you and I talk, we can go for hours because I just let this thing roll because I just think our listeners would like it. But this has been a record 23 minutes before I get to the big number, but I think it was good content. So our big number today, actually, it's an interesting number. It is 130,000. And what that refers to is if you go back and take a look at how many students were taking a gap year before the pandemic, it was in the 40 to 60,000 range across the country. But according to the Nonprofit Gap Year Association in 2021, that number rose to 130,000, which is more than triple the 40,000. So our big number is 130,000. And guess what? It's also a segue into our article. See how I did that there, Julia? You like that?
Nice. Smooth.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
All right, so we'll transition into our article for today. And our article is in the Wall Street Journal. It's written by Alex Janin, and it's called Seeking College Admission Edge. More students take a gap year. It starts out saying rising college rejections have set more kids on a gap year path this fall. So it not only starts out with that big number stat that I shared, but it goes on to say that early indications are that this number is even going to be higher for the 2022 cycle, even that the data is not in yet. And and it says that there are many reasons why students take a gap year. Some of them are driven to have be more better adjusted when they come into college, or have a better sense of self, or finish something that they wanted to do. I've had people I've worked with who wanted to finish their painting projects or their filmmaking projects, or learn a language, or see the world, or make money at work. There's all kinds of different reasons. But according to several people who the Wall Street Journal interviewed, who specialize in gap year consulting, more and more people, and the article talks about this, are taking gap years to take a shot at getting in a better college because they're disappointed with their college options. In fact, one of the gap year experts they interviewed says that a quarter of all of her inquiries now are from students who had not planned whatsoever to take a gap year, but they're facing a pile of rejections and wait lists. And she said in the past, pre-pandemic, that would have been 1/20th or 5% of her inquiries. And so that has gone from 5% of her inquiries. Just to be clear, these are people who they weren't planning on taking a gap year. They didn't like their college options. So that used to be 1 out of 20 for her, and now it's 1 out of 4. So it's a significant increase. And then it goes on to say she says, they've gotten caught up in this elite school syndrome. The whole composition of who's choosing a gap year is changing. And then the article goes on to say many students apply to structured gap year programs that have a range of things like community service, paid work, internships, even learning another language. And sometimes the price for these programs can rival a year's worth of tuition, especially some of the international ones. And then they profile a student who did pretty decent on her SATs, played soccer, lacrosse, and last year didn't go well for her the way she had hoped to. She got a couple of acceptances and was enthusiastic about it. So they mention how she's planning to take a gap year. And then the article also says that students can become more desirable applicants to colleges after a gap year, thanks to their real world experience. But this is important, but it is rare that a college will accept a student that it rejected in the gap year. And they consulted with a different gap year advisor to get that. And then this is a quote that, I know Julia and I will ring true with us because, we talk a lot, and I know we've talked about gap years in the past, just chit-chatting on the phone. And it resonated with me, so I want to read it. It says, "You're not going to cure cancer in a year," he says. "The most important things, your performance in school, your recommendations, your test scores, maybe you can change them at the margin, but you're not going to change them too much." And then they interviewed another person that does gap year advice, who's a former MIT admission officer. And she says something interesting. She says that she's noticed that applications to what they call target schools, Julie and I often call them possible schools. And, there's schools that I sometimes call them coin toss schools. You could flip a coin, like could really go either way. But target schools is a common term for that. Applications to target schools, those between reach and safety, are declining. More people are shooting for the stars. The article goes on to say. And then a couple more points, and then I'm going to let Julia comment on what she wants to talk about in the article. So they also do interview Julia Lithcoth-Hames, who we've recommended her book, How to Raise a Successful Adult, many times, but she's a former at Stanford admissions dean. And she says that she has experienced, from her experience, people for whom gap year made a difference in admissions were a couple things. They usually were people that completely put themselves outside of their comfort zone. And even if there was pain, they grew from that pain and became more resilient. But then the second point she said, which I think is really important, normally they took 2 years off. 2 years off can be better than one if that's what you're trying to do. I don't know about Julia, but I don't know many people that want to just take 2 years off just to try to get in a better college. So there's one more quote, but I'll bring that up a little bit later in our discussion. But Julia, that's a basic distillation of my takeaways. Take this where you want to go. What do you want to comment on?
This article felt like it spoke deeply to me. I saw everything that is mentioned in this article this year more pronounced than ever before. I have a caseload of about 41. My class of 2022 was 41 students, and I just identified probably about 12 to 15 that are going to, against my advice, take a gap year and reapply as a first-year student to likely the same set of colleges. This is my nightmare. I have never seen it work out, mostly because at the very start of this process, it's about you as a student, right? So if you are reapplying, and we know that every year it gets more selective, test optional is, I hope, here to stay. There are some schools who have gotten back to requiring tests, but if you look at the data of those schools, they were always admitting students who did report scores more than those who didn't anyway. So nothing has really changed for those schools, but you would be reapplying with the same academic credentials into a more selective pool. So if you find yourself to be a smart person that, quote, deserves to get into these schools, walk it back a little bit and think about how that logic would actually work out. The one time I have actually seen this work out is right before the pandemic. So the student had to apply to colleges with reporting their test scores. They were really actually great test scores, but they were slightly below the average for an admitted student at their first choice college. They were denied from the first choice college. We knew it was likely because of the SAT scores. The student applied the next year through an early decision process without test scores and were admitted. And that's because there was new academic information. So that's the one time it has worked. Almost always it does not work out. And now you've really taken a risk here, is that you might have less options than you did the year before. You've also spent a lot of money reapplying to the same schools. So even if you do cure cancer in that year, the ability for you to get some magical edge that if we knew existed, we would tell you in a year's time while applying with the same academic credentials, it just is usually not going to work out. One thing I would say is that maybe you didn't have a great senior year in terms of where you were in completing your applications, maybe mental health wise, and you didn't really get to put in the time and effort into the applications that you should have or wanted to. That might make a small difference. You also might, I'm a big proponent if maybe you didn't know what you wanted and then realized I'm going to apply to a whole different set of schools. This is actually what I'm looking for. That's fine, actually, because now you're applying to it into different pools. Yes, they'll be more selective, but you're a brand new applicant to them. You're not the same. You already know what the school thinks of you from your first time around, right? So now you're applying to a different set of schools with a greater intentionality, which might change the outcome at those schools. But again, you're not reapplying with the same credentials. You're applying to a new school with your old credentials. And we don't ever know, quote, what went wrong, and maybe nothing went wrong, right? It's just by the numbers. So having a new SAT score or having new recommendations that might not have changed anything or will change anything. It wasn't your SAT score or your recommendations the first time around. So there's a lot of risk involved, and I find it's a lot better for a student. I'm a big proponent of gap years, but if you're just going to take a gap year just to reapply, I get nervous about that. And I would much rather you actually maybe attend a school and then transfer from that school, because now you will be applying with new academic credentials. If you're probably likely to do really well in that first semester or the first full year in college. So you will be applying with maybe higher academic credentials to a transfer school. Depending on the school, they might actually do more business in transfer. University of Southern California is one of my favorite schools among my students. They don't have an early action. They don't have an early decision. So students don't get in the first time. They give you the exact pathway for you to follow to get in via transfer. And I would never want a student to attend a college just to transfer. I actually find a lot of my students who go in like that end up liking their school and staying at their school, or end up applying to a wholly different set of schools for transfer because they realize what it is they really liked about that college. And the last thing I'll say, and this is what I spent a lot of time doing this spring with my students, is a lot of the colleges will stipulate. So let's say you decide you don't like your results, you decide to take a gap year, and you do deposit at one of your schools, and you say you're going to defer for the year, do a gap year. It's granted by the college. A lot of the time that college will send you a letter saying, we've granted your gap year. Please do not use this time to apply to other colleges. We really would not like you doing that. And in fact, if they were to get knowledge that you did do that, and it does put your counselor in a tough position, because if you're asking your high school to resend your materials, now the people at the high school is complicit in something that you're not supposed to be doing. So I always ask my students for the letters that they got granting the gap year deferral, just to be sure that my students are being ethical and I'm being ethical. So, and then the other thing I'll say is, a lot of, like Mark mentioned, a lot of the gap year experiences are really expensive, and a lot of the time, if not all the time, colleges know that isn't an option for a very few amount of students. So just because you have the ability to pay for one of those programs doesn't necessarily make you a more compelling applicant in your time off.
No. Well said. And I'm going to quote something from the article, and I think Julia spoke to it already, but people have this mindset. So they profiled a student named Lauren Pearson. She's a high school senior in Ontario, Canada. She had set her sights pretty high in the first round of applications. It says mostly Ivy League and other highly selectives, but she was rejected from all of them. It says except her safety schools. I'm just quoting the article. And then it says Lauren plans to use her gap year to retake the SAT, to get new letters of recommendation, to take classes and do an internship. And then it says she hopes to change the minds of admission officers at Cornell or Stanford. And it goes on to say, I'm a little worried because maybe the next year will be even more competitive. So Julia, can you speak to, if you had a student in admissions and they applied, I'll just say the class of 2022, and then they reapplied the class of 2023, would the admission officers know of that past track record of the student applying before, or would that somehow escape their notice?
That is a great question. I actually had a student this year who very thoughtfully applied to their college. They actually ended up going to a service academy and very quickly realized this is not for me. So unenrolled before classes started, and then decided to reapply as a first-year student to their former college list. And I actually ended up calling the schools to figure out hey, would you look at what you did before? And this student actually got good news from some of these schools. So you would think, oh, just turn in the same application and we'll get the same answer. I got across the board, except for at their flagship in-state public school. And this was a very strong applicant, right? So that school was going to be happy to take the student no matter what. Every admission officer told me, please do not apply with the same Common App essay. Do not apply with the same supplements, because we might pull your old file and we want to see that you made the effort and intentionality and thoughtfulness if you're going to reapply to us. So I would say that you do need to redo those applications if you're going to apply to the same schools.
Yeah, and there's several things Julia said before that I think are really important. I just want to underscore. One is, and the article actually mentioned it as well, if you are going to do this gap year and apply, like, especially if you're just doing like 1 year, applying to the same schools is really risky. It is really risky. There's a reason why they didn't admit you, and they're not going to completely forget that application.
Right.
That's one thing. And so to think, and then here's another thing I really want to emphasize. It's really important. We're talking about the next year, but let's talk about the reality. The reality is, okay, are you going to apply early action or early decision by November or regular admission by January? How much could you have done in a couple months?
Exactly.
So it's not like it's some 12 months to reset everything.
Right.
You've got a few months before deadlines. And then another thing we haven't talked about yet, which is you're going to be reaching out to counselors who have now moved on to the next caseload. And, in a school like Julia's, where she has a caseload of 41, they can make it work administratively. But if you're at one of these schools with 500 people on the caseload, I mean, it can even be difficult, maybe even getting transcripts.
Right.
Let alone like recommendations from old teachers who are saying, I have enough with my current students. Like, they've moved on to the new set and you're not necessarily a priority. Like, you've graduated and you've moved on. Like, our priority is the people right in front of us. Anything you want to say on that, Julia?
Absolutely, completely. In fact, I've had, for example, a lot of the services that high schools use to send your materials no longer allow us to send those materials after you've graduated. So Wisconsin, I'm hoping someday Wisconsin does not take email transcripts. So I have to snail mail your final transcript to Wisconsin. And then I have no idea if somebody's filed it and put it in the right place. And so there is a lot of risk involved. And I'm a well-resourced counselor. So like Mark said, if your high school is unable to send transcripts, gather, or those teachers who are probably also overburdened, wanting to write new letters of rec for you, and maybe you just graduated, so now they're thinking about their current students, and it's going to be hard for them to think about like, oh, let me write up a whole nother letter of recommendation for the student that I taught last year. So it can be a big risk, and it might not work logistically for you either.
Yeah. So in this case of Lauren Pearson, if she was coming to either Julia or I, we would dissuade her from this plan. She thinks she's going to get into the highly selectives, Cornell and Stanford's 1 year later by just improving her test score a little bit and getting new recs. Like, we would never say never, because we're not the ones around the committee making this decision, but guard your heart, because chances are not great.
Right.
And one thing that Julia said, and I'm always hesitant to talk about this, Vince and I dabbled in this a little bit recently, the transfer option. I'm hesitant sometimes to, and you are as well, to introduce it right away. Is it a strategic plan before somebody even gives college a shot? Because I don't like you to come in with 1 foot out the door. But Julia's right. It would be so much better to go to college, crush it. And if it's not working for you, transfer. I mean, I was surprised how well transfer students I worked with did with 1 semester in college. 1 semester, and there are some extremely transfer-friendly schools out there that have huge differential admit rates between their transfer admit rate and their freshman, first year admit rate. And so if you're that disappointed with your options and you want to be strategic, it would just be so much better. you'd save a lot of money, and you'd most likely have better outcomes.
Absolutely.
So anything else we want to share with our listeners, Julia? Or do you think we wrap this one up?
No, I'm really glad you brought this up because it's definitely the waters I'm swimming in now. And I feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I'm really glad that we did get to sort of chat about this from our view of things.
Well, see, this is where we have such a great listener community, because they send us articles that resonate with them. And this is one that multiple people sent. And anytime we get multiple people sending, I can always tell if something's resonating out there. If we get like 5 or more people that send an article, then we're like, okay, there's some buzz out there about this. Maybe we need to talk about it. And I don't think we had 5 on this one, but we did have multiple. And so thank you guys for continuing to send us articles that you might be interested in a little bit more commentary on. And we'll give you our best advice. And so thank you all for listening.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Lisa, I feel like we haven't talked in like forever.
I know. It's been too long.
Well, I've been world traveler. I looked at my calendar, and 19 of the last 23 days I've been on the road. So I have so much I want to share with our listeners, but I can't do it all in one episode. It's going to have to be drib drab here and there, a little bit here. I got to meet 11 of our podcast listeners on the road.
That's fantastic.
And 5 of them treated me. So I got treated to like really nice food. It was really fun.
That is very nice.
Yeah. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, really good places. So, one thing I will say, I kept thinking about something that you said. The Midwest is like flyover country, and that just needs to change. There's amazing schools in the Midwest that people need to look at more.
Oh, yeah. There's great schools in the Midwest.
They really are. And the Midwest knows it, but a lot of times the coast doesn't know it, so.
Yeah. No, maybe maybe the Midwesterners don't want the coastal people there. I don't know. But there are some really fantastic schools in the Midwest that probably are not getting their fair due. So.
Well, I'll tell you, I was at Denver University, full day, 12 hours. CU Boulder, full day, probably 10 hours there. Colorado College, another complete full day. Then School of Mines, so that was Colorado. Augsburg and Minneapolis. Then I went to Madison. Madison was incredible. I did a 3-hour tour, and then one of our listeners, active listeners, Diane, she gave me another 4-hour tour on top of the 3-hour tour.
Wow.
So I walked over 19,000 steps on Madison's campus. How cool is that?
Yeah, and you probably didn't even see the whole thing because it's so big.
Well, yeah, it was awesome, though. And then I had an amazing day in Milwaukee. That was awesome. Marquette, I'm in love. You guys will be hearing more about that. That school is incredible, in my opinion. And so I'll be doing spotlights on some of these. And just want to shout out all the listeners that took time to either meet me in the lobby of my hotel room or the great people out there, Jennifer in Wisconsin, Diana in Wisconsin, Dave and Kirby in Colorado, Shauna in Minnesota. All of those listeners treated me to really good food. And then another 6 or 7 also just had great meetings with. So we have the most amazing listeners. And, as admissions, I love to travel. It was made it so much fun. And then I've been locked in the pandemic. And so that's the hardest part of the pandemic for me is that all my school visits are canceled. So now they're opening up. So I felt like this is the first time since 2019 that I've really gotten out there. So anyway, I'm kind of on cloud 9. So if I seem a little hyper caffeinated today, you know why. I do want to share, continuing our theme, I do want to share one thing that I think would surprise people if they were in admissions. And that is a lot of times if there's some unique intricacies or what's the word I'm looking for? Eccentricities about your idiosyncrasies, I guess would be, but about your school. It's actually good for you to put that into the additional information section. Like, don't necessarily assume that every admission officer knows these quirky things about your school. like they actually can really appreciate that. Part of their goal is to get to know that your school better. And if you've got something, it could be anything from unique requirements to grading irregularities, or even a teacher that's extremely hard grader. You have to do that with a little bit of deftness because you don't want to come off like a whiner. But things like that are really appreciated if you help, you help admission officers to understand the unique, little peculiarities that your school has. And I don't think a lot of times people think that way, and they might think it's condescending, but it's actually really appreciated. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And, I think it just helps you. It's a more authentic picture of you and your context. And I think they appreciate having the opportunity to see that.
Yeah. No, most definitely. So that's my little tip for today. And we're going to dive in. It's bonus content. And I'm actually going to share a presentation I heard from one of the schools. I'm not going to share which one. I'm adding a little bit of my content to it, but I thought it was so good. I thought our listeners would love it. And mostly what I'm sharing is something I took from a leaders event that I attended when I was on the road. And it was entitled, "What Keeps Us Up at Night?" Meaning admissions leaders, VPs, deans of enrollment, senior level people. What keeps us, tossing and turning in our beds and not getting sleep. But another way you could look at it is, why are admission officers so aggressive in their recruitment? Why am I getting all this mail? Why does it seem like they're kind of pressuring me to apply ED, or all of these different things that schools do that we oftentimes talk about, sending SNAP apps, fast apps, VIP, all these different things. We won't mention all the tactics and strategies and recruitment tactics, but one listener wrote in something once to us, and it was a listener who was also in admissions, and they said the more listeners can understand things from our perspective, the better it will serve them. And so I thought it'd be interesting to go through some of these things that keep admission officers up at night. But by the way, if I get distracted, you know what I learned? Wisconsin has amazing ice cream. Did you know that, Lisa?
Well, you got to think it's a dairy state. And so all the dairy is good.
Yes. I don't know why that never dawned on me.
Ice cream. Now you've started something in my brain.
I still have it in my taste buds. The Memorial Union ice cream overlooking. Well, I usually get like two mixtures. So I got praline pecan was the main one. And then the other one I got was some kind of like lime something. It was so good. And Minnesota has good ice cream too, by the way. Even though I know it's not the dairy state, I realize it's not. Anyway, I'm a little distracted. And I'm not the hugest ice cream person. I probably have ice cream 2 or 3 times a year. But I had ice cream there that was amazing. I had ice cream in Boulder that was amazing, in some little place in Boulder. And Minnesota, oh my goodness, anybody in Minnesota knows about this place called Nelson's. It's just ridiculous. Or, the kids' cup is larger than an extra large at most places.
Oh my goodness.
And then the good old Wisconsin. So
maybe you've just become an ice cream person, with all this. Welcome to my world,
Well, you know what? You know how sometimes if something's really good, you like it? Like really good ice cream. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I usually have ice cream 3 times a year, and I had it 3 times on this trip. So I had my quota for the year. Anyway, let me get back to college admissions. I just had a flashback for how good that ice cream was.
Oh my goodness. So. Like an actual sensory flashback. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I can't wait to tell everybody all I learned about all these schools. I'm going to do deep dives on Madison. I've actually asked Diana if she'll do that with me because she's like a scholar. She graduated from the school and has lived there for 30 years. Her tour is like better than what you get from admission officers. So we'll do something creative and do a spotlight there. Marquette, I definitely have to do one. Some of the other ones I've already done already. And so I'll just do like visit updates. So all those things are coming in time. But you know what? I am happy to be back because I kind of missed all my clients. So, but I'm back in the groove. Anyway, let me not be distracted. Let's dive in. So I'll just comment on a few, Lisa, and get your commentary. So So one thing that's keeping admission officers up at night is all this talk about you don't need to go to college. You know, the devaluation of college, all the articles. As one of the presenters said, why is Harvard Business Journal running an article literally called "You Don't Need a College Degree to Land a Great Job" when literally everybody that wrote that article has a degree?
Mm-hmm.
And so you see the stats, less people going to college, all the buzz around not going to college, the decreased rates, like that's adding some stress. So that's point number one. Number two, there's just way more competitors than there used to be. One of the presenters mentioned that if you take a look at their top 20, cross schools, then that's less than 20% of all their applicants. So you just have goo gobs of competitors out there now, way, way more than you used to be, because people are either applying more nationally, and there's lots of reasons for that, as some I'll mention in a second. Another reason, the thing that's keeping people up, is increased use of merit aid by competitors. So the more, competitive the culture gets, the more schools try to use merit aid to entice. The more they use merit aid to entice, the more it puts pressure on you, and people are pushing back about the packages. And so that's the third one. A fourth one is the growth of regional recruiters. So you got all these regional recruiters now located right in your backyard that are plucking kids out of your area that might have come to you and trying to tell them to go to, all these different schools 500-600 miles away, but they live right there and they're meeting them at Starbucks and they're courting them. And that's a relatively new phenomenon. You certainly don't see it. It's not new, but it's growing and escalating out there. And I'll mention one more, then I'll just get your feedback, Lisa, because I've got, good 12 or 15 here. And so,
I'm sure you have more than
maybe.
that. Anyway,
maybe. I had a lot of them. I do. So this one is one we've kind of talked about before, but it was really a point of emphasis. And I've usually brought it up in the context of why it's so hard in admissions, because you have so many different constituencies to please. But the way it was presented was, every year you're expected to do better than the year before. Every year. Your academic profile is expected to look better. The number of states you have should be better than the year before. The number of countries. The quality of applicants you have in various majors. And then you have new majors, and they want, to have kids. You're expected to bring in more full pay kids than the year before. You're expected to bring in more low income kids and more first gen kids. And then athletics, they want you to do better than the year before. And the fine arts want you to do better. And then at the same time, your school has a vision to expand its enterprise. And whatever that may be. It may be, we need a new science center, we need a new gym and fitness center, we need all this stuff. And and one of the presenters literally said, by the time it's all done, gee, you want us to cure cancer?
mm-hmm.
So anyway, I've thrown a few things out there. Anything you want to comment on?
Well, especially that last point, that's I feel like this idea that you always need to improve and always need to do more, and you're expected to always improve it. It's kind of, I think it's like an American sickness, quite honestly, because you see that in corporate America too, where like, oh, you had this year, this is your sales goal. We're going to up it 30%. You did such a great job. And so it just causes so much stress.
Yeah.
And not that people shouldn't strive to do the best that they can, but there's all these factors that can impact why somebody didn't get, all the students they got last year, or only got like 2 students from Utah instead of 3. I mean, there's all these things that are out of their control. And I can easily see how that sort of pressure would drive them nuts and keep them up at night.
Yeah. And this is a lot of board of trustees stuff too, right? Like the trustees are looking at this, and I could add more, like you need to bring in more early decision kids. And then they're like looking at they're looking at your, your cross schools, and they're looking at that, and they're like, wow, this school brought in this many early decision kids. How come we don't have that many? Or this school grew the applicant pool by blah, blah, blah. But you're going to say something else. Go ahead.
I was gonna say too, like sort of the arms race with merit aid, the arms race with facilities. I mean, it all kind of goes along the same lines.
Yeah.
Everyone is, instead of just concentrating on doing the best job that college can do at what it does, like people seem to really be competing with each other in some very aggressive ways. And I think it produces some very interesting admissions responses and outcomes. So, but I don't know if that's going to change. I mean, like, as you said, the board of trustees has a certain, set of goals for each school, and, that's what you have to go by.
Yeah, no, your point is well taken about corporate America, because it's not just your annual goal, sales goal. Corporate America, every single quarter, you got to report to Wall Street for publicly traded companies. And even if you're in sales, it's like, yeah, you have your annual goals. Like, I used to be in sales. I know that pressure. My brother's in sales now. And every quarter he has his quarterly goals. And you know what I mean? And so that is part of our capitalistic culture, I guess, and a certain component of it. I think some of it is that and some of it is other stuff. But I definitely think there's probably more pressure in our country than some countries.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's, the problem is it's a lot of very short term thinking. And so people are trying to maximize like a short term outcome, but it might be bad for the institution long term to do some of these things. But that's not the metric that they're getting judged by. Like my dad would always say, like, if you want to get along with somebody and do a deal with them, you have to know how they get paid, right? What metrics are they being, what metrics control their salary, and you have to help them achieve that. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But, I feel like that, we see this so often. And then you find, like, again, people will do some very interesting things in order to make the short-term goal happen. But long-term, it's bad for them, for their company, for the university, for whatever. So that's just, that's my pet peeve about capitalism right now.
It's just, I mean, it's a hard job, and I'll keep going, and we'll get through all these, and probably just have some general talk about them when I get through all of them as well. So another one is the changing demographics. So that's tough. Like we've talked a lot about this, the birth dearth, the demographic cliff, and the changing demographics are actually quite complex. So you have the decrease of students, particularly in the Northeast and in the Midwest. Like every year now, quite a few years in a row, there have been less students coming out of those regions. And so if you're drawing a lot of your students from the Midwest and the Northeast, that can be really, really tough. But there's also other demographics. So what you're seeing is a lot of the growth is in the Latino community, which is great. But a lot of times that is not, and I'm not trying to stereotype, because we know, there's all levels of socioeconomic accomplishments in all people. But in general, that's a population. It's newer here, and it can't always pay close to the sticker price at a lot of these schools.
Right.
So you're having a huge surge of growth in a population that needs substantial financial aid. So then that puts a lot of budgetary pressure on you by having, so much of the growth in a population that's just going to need a lot of money in order to make it, And once again, there's certainly, I can hear somebody say, "Don't stereotype me. I'm Latino and I'm wealthy." But, we know there's full pay families in all communities, but I'm just talking percentages. You're seeing a decrease in white wealthier families applying to schools, and an increase in families in general that need financial aid, and first gen also, or first gen, which requires more support. Not even just the demographics, just orienting them to a college environment.
Right.
So there's that going on, which is a substantial challenge. And then there's, we've talked about Nathan Graub before many times on our podcast. He's kind of considered the foremost expert, right, at Carleton College there, on demographic trends within colleges. According to his research, private schools are going to be down 6% in their enrollment by 2035. Public schools down 10% in their enrollment. Community colleges down even more than that. And regional publics down 10%. And then more elite privates are expected to be down, like schools that are not in the top 50 for selectivity, but like 50 to 100, they're expected to be down 5%. And it's only the most selective schools that are expected to either stay the same or have surge, over the next 10 to 12 years. And as one of the presenters said, you can't show that to your trustees because they'll be like, okay, that's fine, but I expect you to be the exception. You're kind of not really allowed to have a bad year. And so all of this is happening in the context of decreased students to go for. A lot of people look at, ever since the global financial crisis, 2007, 2008, people have either been delaying having kids or having less kids. So the birth rates just continue to go down. And there's something called the replacement rate, the number of kids you need to have in order to break even. And that needs to be at 2.1, to just break even. And right now the US is at 1.6. And pretty much the whole world is in a global decline. There are a few countries at 2.1 on the replacement rate, but most countries are in the ones. So this is not even just a national, but a kind of an international phenomenon. And then there's other things schools are wrestling with, like Roe Wade came up, and how is that going to impact? Lisa, you and I, we've both seen many students have said, I do not want to go to a school in a state that, doesn't have the philosophy on Roe Wade that I think they should have. Like, that's really, I don't know if that's a knee-jerk reaction it just happened and people adjust to it and get used to it, or I don't know if 3-4 years from now people will still be feeling the same way. But I know that we're both experiencing people saying, change my college list, take that state off. And so that was one of the things that was brought up. How is that going to impact our enrollment if people don't like our state's philosophy there? And I'll tell you a huge one that came up, and I'll talk about this for a while, and then we can have some more conversation before I get into the others. So affirmative action and legacy admission, those are really big topics, especially affirmative action. Affirmative action is freaking schools out. The fact that it's all but a foregone conclusion, really, that next June, you can expect the Supreme Court to make that illegal. And they are freaking out because they don't know how really all the ways in which that's going to impact them. So one person said that we use a lot of our need-based aid to help our diversity there. Otherwise, we won't have the diversity that we'll like. And so now are we going to have to change how we target our need-based aid? Another person said that we have literally scholarships that have been endowed for people of color. Some of these go back decades. This is something I never even thought of. Are we going to have to try to find the original donor or find who has like proxy over that and see if they can change the language? Like another person said that. Another person said that we have to have a complete audit by our whole legal experts to find out what we're doing now that we'll be able to do and what we'll have to change. And it's kind of an unknown. Like, we're not sure which of the things are we doing that we will still be able to do and which of the things are we doing that we'll have to change. So it's a big unknown. That's stressful. And of course, they're very upset about it because pretty much almost all schools really believe that a diverse applicant pool is what gives people the best education. So they're not happy that they're being told how to impact their student body in a way that they feel will adversely impact their ability to educate. So some of them were talking about things like, how creative can they get? Are they going to be able to target certain cities? Can they target school districts? Can they target schools without having a racial component to it? Is that going to be allowed? Is it not allowed? Like, we don't know. We're like getting these audits done because they see the handwriting on the wall and it's a total unknown and none of them like it. So thoughts? What are you thinking?
Oh, so many thoughts. I just wanted to say in the terms of like trying to, the demographic shift in this country, and then there's more of an immigrant population that is larger. I mean, I just read an article that the Latinx community, like their economic wealth is rising at exactly the same rate as all other immigrant communities, but they're just have been here for less time. So they haven't gotten to that point that they can afford that. But it is true that like they, a lot of times, first generation parents to this country, don't really understand our educational system. And so there's a lot of challenges for those kids. And then, obviously they, if people aren't going to help them with financial aid, they're probably going to have a harder time going, which is a shame. Now, in terms of let's just say, political conditions that are beyond schools' control, right? So I'm just thinking if I were Washington University in St. Louis, which is as we all know, fantastic, amazing school,
Yep.
I would be freaking out a little bit right now because, a lot of the people that they recruit from are from, places that are not going to be happy with Missouri's very extreme abortion law. And so I just feel like this is going to upend things tremendously, at least in the short term, and maybe in the long term, because faculty are also leaving. I've read several articles about that. Faculty are just leaving anyway because being a professor is really hard. Getting tenure is really hard. The pay is not great a lot of times. So they're already leaving, but now this is just kind of going to hasten that, and we're going to lose a lot of talent. As far as the affirmative action, and that is such a difficult issue. I'm hoping that schools will find ways to, still have diversity in their classes, even without explicitly doing it. But I don't even know how you would do that.
Well, they're going to find ways, and remember, you've got the 9 states that have it outlawed now, and they do their best to get creative. You look at Texas, went to its 6%. Well, it was a 10% plan. They went to the 6% plan. And then you look at, University of California looks at eligibility in local context. I see some of the things Michigan is doing. So they're going to come up with ways. That's indisputable. But the thing is, right now they don't know what's going to be legal or illegal, because
Right.
you have to exactly see what the ruling comes down to know what's permissible and what's not. They know it's coming and they know they can't wait till next June. But until you actually know the fine print and then have your lawyers
Right. You don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what's creating a lot of stress. And it really hit me when one of the representatives said, do we literally have to go back and look at our endowed scholars? Because, that's the thing with donations. Somebody can say, I think I went to the school, I think it was great, but I don't think we had enough Black kids. It would have been better. So I want to endow money for that. And that's designated giving. And then you're using that money as part of your financial aid, but you can't just go change that without donor approval.
Right.
And then all the recruitment programs, whether there's a summer transition program or a flying program, all the things that schools use. So this more than anything, this came up multiple times in multiple schools. It's just, they're just throwing their hands up in the air and we don't have a lot of answers right now. We just know that the tsunami is coming. We can't afford to sit and wait till it hits next June. We need to start being proactive. We're kind of waiting on our legal team to give us guidance, but yet the legal team would like to know the fine print of the decision to give it more, so it's just a time of stress. Friends, this completes the first half. I hope you'll join us next week for the final part.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, hopefully you've been enjoying Sue Corner, Dean of Admission at Willamette University. Been there for, 30 plus years, especially counting her time as a student there. And we've had a great conversation about myths and misperceptions about private schools. But we're really going to delve deep into who Willamette University is now. And I think you're really going to like Sue's transparency. It's one of my favorite interviews that I did. Listen and enjoy. So you go all the way back to the late 80s, as a student at Willamette. What changes have you seen?
Oh, gosh. Willamette has changed and Salem has changed. And I didn't address your question earlier about Salem, so I'll do that too. But Willamette is really interesting. Just yesterday, there was a dad on campus bringing his son, and he was an alum from my time at Willamette. It's always fun to connect with those alums who bring their kids back. And he has not been here in 30 some years. And he said, it was great. There's all these there's new and different buildings, and there are things that are so different. And then he also said, and yet it's so wonderfully familiar. We are this place with a very deep sense of history, and it's a beautiful setting. Have you ever been to campus, Mark? Have you been to Willamette?
No, but I'm scheduled to do your Northwest 5.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
tour.
So I'm very excited about it.
Oh,
I'm very
good.
excited about it.
You've got to come see it. It's a beautiful campus, park-like, really traditional bricks and ivy kind of thing. It's great. But there has definitely been, growth in facilities and resources over the last generation since I was here as a student. The biggest change, I would say, is when I was a student at Willamette, while I met people who were from all over Oregon, and I met students who were different from me in lots of ways as a person who had grown up in Portland, there was a lot more homogeny to our student population. In this last generation, Willamette has done a tremendous job of addressing the question of access and the question of why is diversity of background and interest really critical to a quality educational experience. So the student body is different than it used to be. It's more interesting in terms of socioeconomic background difference. Just every way you define diversity, we have grown, I think. I think that's the biggest change. And the other thing too is Willamette is we're steeped in tradition and history. That is a very kind of unifying thing for people who come through this place. And yet we aren't afraid to grow and change as the market demands growth and change. And I think I've seen more of that in this last, 10, 15 years than I think had happened when I was here as a student. This idea to say, business it's not one of the traditional liberal arts. That's not really what we do here. But you know what? People are asking for a high quality undergraduate business major in this region. And we are so equipped to do that because of the MBA program. Let's adjust. Let's adapt who we are. Let's make that available to students.
I'm sure that will be popular too.
It's huge. Yeah, it's already huge. We've developed data science in the last couple of years because everyone wants to count everything all the time now. Data science, it's a critically important function in the world, not necessarily something that would typically have been offered at a liberal arts institution, but we have everything we need to do that really well. So we've launched that. We're not afraid to evolve, and I'm really proud of Willamette for that. So I think those are some of the things that have changed. And then I would say Salem has changed too. Salem, I think, has always had a little bit of a we live in the shadow of Portland sort of reputation. Everybody knows Portland, and Portland has a great reputation for being quirky and interesting and beautiful and all of that. And as a native Portlander, I totally agree. It's a wonderful city. But Salem is an incredible small city too. We are smaller. We're the second largest city in the state. And we are the seat of government, which makes it this really interesting place to be a college student. The campus sits right in the heart of downtown. So students have this ability to walk to everything, not just the internships that are across the street, but all of the little coffee shops and theaters and stores and everything you could want as a college student is right. It's right here. It's very accessible. So we feel the downtown area to me feels like kind of this quaint college town. And yet it's the state capital. So there's resources. So it's this really interesting combination, and it makes it a very, very good place to live and learn as a student. You don't have to get in your car to do very much here and have all that you want at your fingertips. Salem has a great food scene, great restaurants.
Everybody likes that.
That's something that has evolved certainly since my, not even since my time as a student, I would say even in the last just 10 years, the restaurant scene in downtown Salem has evolved a lot. It's a great place to live. I love Salem. Love Portland, where I grew up, but I wouldn't go back. Salem's great.
So I'm going to ask you a hard question. Admission officers don't like this one.
Uh-oh.
So how is Willamette different from Lewis and Clark? Sometimes you get, I don't know them, talk to them, they know them, but I also know you spent some time there, and anytime someone's been in the state for 35 years, obviously you have a lot of overlap with them for applicants. You certainly must have a sense of how the two institutions are different in some ways.
Yeah, I did work at Lewis and Clark, but for a short time and a long time ago, and it's it is a wonderful place. We are in a consortium with Lewis and Clark that you mentioned a few minutes ago. What we call the Northwest 5 institutions, which are kind of the five Phi Beta Kappa liberal arts colleges in Oregon and Washington. So Lewis and Clark is one of our partners in that group, and we love them. And we do. They're our biggest overlap in applications. Lewis and Clark is number one on our list most every year because we have a lot of similarities. I don't know how to define the difference between a Willamette student and a Lewis and Clark student necessarily, except to say I think Lewis and Clark's identity is very wrapped in things international. This is something that they've really embraced in lots of ways and did a great job with, and that's a super important part of the college experience. Willamette does a lot of work internationally, lots of study abroad, that kind of thing too. But I think this idea of service and leadership and putting knowledge into action is more the identity of the Willamette student. So however that translates into who chooses which institution, I do think Willamette students are very, very, while they're very diverse, they are unified in this idea that they are really engaged extracurricularly. They are joiners, they are doers, they are excited about starting new things and getting involved and leading in a way that's really exciting to see. And whereas at Lewis and Clark, I think there's a little bit more of the how am I going to engage with this idea of things international? And I don't know if that translates into action on campus and excitement about being involved in quite the same way.
So you mentioned overlaps. Lewis and Clark's normally the big one. Who else are common overlaps for?
The other institutions in the Northwest 5 are certainly big for us. So that would be Whitman, University of Puget Sound, and Reed, probably the lowest number with Reed. We see a fair number of overlap with University of Portland.
Sure.
Certainly just because people are looking, regionally. And then in terms of on the public side, our biggest local rival is the University of Oregon, followed not too far behind by Oregon State University. Very different types of institutions than we are, but both of them have an honors college that tries to kind of replicate the small college experience within the bigger institution. And so we see some overlap with them. And then we have a lot of overlap with the UCs. There aren't a huge number of small colleges like the Northwest 5 in California when you think of the size of the population of California.
Sure.
So a lot of those students, if they're looking for this type of education, will look north. And so we see those students looking at us, but also doing what I think seems to be required by law in California, which is that you apply to the UCs.
Sure.
Everybody does.
I would think with liberal arts and science schools outside of the Pacific Northwest, Occidental there might be some overlap. Do you see any of that?
Yeah, we definitely have overlap with Oxy and with the Claremont
colleges. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Overlap there. Not quite as much as with our more local peers.
Sure. Yeah. Let's talk about your admission process. Talk about what's required and what you look for in a student.
Yeah, thanks. So Willamette is a common application school. So that's the route to application. We never charge an application fee because we care about access and we don't want people to not apply because the $80 isn't available for them to do so. We do a very thorough, holistic review of the application. I feel like we're privileged in that our staff actually gets to do that. We have the right number of people working in our office to be able to review the right number of applications that we seek. Going back to that conversation we just had, we're
Sure.
not looking to inflate the pool to make more work. We get to actually review each application very thoughtfully. The first thing I would say we look at is the transcript. That is the center to the application, not just the GPA. We look at that, but it's really looking closely at what is the coursework, to what degree has the student chosen to embrace rigorous opportunities, and whatever that means in the context of their school. So we can't expect a full IB diploma from a student who's at a tiny rural school that doesn't offer that. But if they're at the tiny rural school that offers the opportunity to take a couple of dual enrollment courses, then we're going to be looking for those. Whatever it means to see that student is motivated academically and brave enough to challenge themselves. That's what we're really looking for, and translated into some level of success. Of course, we want to see students trying those things and then succeeding. They don't have to be perfect by any means. Everyone who comes to Willamette does not have to have a 4-point. We see our job as continuing to help them evolve and learn, and so we see them as works in progress, and particularly given the effects of COVID the last few years, we know that we're seeing different things in the transcript than we've seen in the past. And
I have to say something. I've been pretty pleased with some students that really had a COVID dip in their grades, and I've seen them get in some schools. I've seen grace extended, from schools, especially if they bounced back senior year and had upward trajectory. And let's say, even if it was, let's say 11 was the year which is such an important year, but if they did well in 10th and they're showing the upward trend in 12th, I've been quite pleased at schools taking that into consideration.
Yeah, I think it's across the board. And I think that's exactly the term that we're using for it. It's funny that you say grace. That's what we talk about in our admission committee when we're looking at an applicant who, might be kind of on the margin. We talk about extending a little bit of COVID grace and are trying to really
COVID
do that.
Grace, I love it.
Yeah. So that transcript is really important. That's the center of what we're looking at. We look very closely as kind of the next measure of academic preparation for Willamette. We look at that essay very closely. So if anyone has questions about, does the essay really get read? Does it really matter? It definitely does. It should not be blown off. It's one of those things that really tells us if a student is prepared. So we love to read the essay. And then because we're so focused here on that service and leadership and involvement component, that activities list and what a student has been involved in translates not just into our admission decision, but that is also factored into the financial aid decision. All of these things factor into what level of merit scholarship a student will receive. And it's been part of our mission as an admission office, I think, in the last several years to really help students understand that activities list is not just about what they've done at school. We want to know what they're passionate about and what they give time to in all contexts. So whether that's church or family or a job or, whatever it might be, a passion that they've chosen to explore, we want to know about that. That helps us really understand who they would be here on our campus.
I'm trying to get the word out on that. I think we need a name other than activity list, almost like, EFC is going to go through a whole rebranding and the new FAFSA 2024 Student Aid Index, which I welcome.
Sure.
Because everybody thought it was, if it says expected family contribution, that must be what I pay. And so I'm trying, but I feel like it's a little bit of an uphill paddling upstream because it's called, people always call it the activity list. And then so people think it's structured school-based activities, and
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
nice
Yeah.
to have you emphasize that. I appreciate that. Any college specific writing at all in the application that's unique only to your application?
We asked for one very short, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a full essay. It can be a couple of sentences, but we do ask for what is the single influencer that inspired them to apply to Willamette. And it's one of our favorite parts of the application to
Sure.
read, I will say. It's just so great when students have truly done their homework and are really excited about Willamette. It's really fun to see what they write in that piece. But beyond that, no, we try not to divert the students' attention or time, which first and foremost, we want to be focusing their time on their schoolwork in this all important senior year. So the application is important, but we don't want it to be so all consuming that it takes away from their ability to be present in the classroom. So we really hope that the writing part that they do is focused on that, that main Common App essay.
No interview?
Interview is not required. However, we love to interview as many of our students as we can.
And do you actually do it yourself as admission officers?
We do. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
We interview when we're traveling in the fall. We interview via Zoom now, which has been a great addition. We interview when people come to campus. It's really informative, especially if it can happen, before we make the admission decision. It's valuable to have the conversation, even if we've already had made an admission decision. But when I sit down to read an application and I can picture the person whose file I'm reading, it makes a difference. I will remember who they are,
agree.
I
did admissions with interviews and without, and I'm a huge interview person. I realize it takes a lot of manpower, but when you're in a community like yours, it can really help you make a lot of decisions, informed decisions about bringing certain people into the community that can bring that spark and work together and all that. So I love it when I hear that schools interview. And anytime you're using your actual admission officers, you're kind of putting your money where your mouth is as far as valuing it, because that's your time, and that time is so precious.
Yeah. Well, we're a personal place at Willamette. And so adding that personal element of the admission counselor actually getting to meet the students that we're going to be making decisions about, we really do value that. So we are putting our money where our mouth is, or our time where our mouth is. And that's really important to us.
So here's my other really hard question that admission officers don't always like: demonstrated interest, engagement, scoring, all of that. What would you say the role that plays, looking at how engaged people have been, whether it's been visiting virtually, visiting in person, did an interview? You can see they've been all over the website. They're opening the emails, how it all works. Like,
Yep.
What role does that play, if any, in assessment and in the process?
Yeah, I would say, Willamette, we get to say yes to more of the applications that we have to say no to, which is nice. So the vast majority of the decisions that we make are based on the caliber and quality of the application itself and our personal interactions, like you just said, with the interview with that student. If there is a student who is being evaluated in our committee, meaning we're having a much larger conversation about that student because they are an outlier for some reason. They're on the margin academically. They have some sort of blip in their application. There's something about them that makes them stand out in a way that isn't typical and that we need to discuss at a much deeper level. Sometimes with those students, we look at that record of engagement. That's really when it comes into play.
When you're on the fence.
When we're on the fence, yeah. If we're unsure, then it helps us to know, are we making this really difficult decision? Are we choosing to extend something here for someone who's doesn't really even care about their application to Willamette? That is a piece that we will consider at that point to some degree, not in any way that is quantified, but just as part of the conversation. So otherwise, I would say we love it when students are asking questions, are actively engaged, are using us as resources, even if they're just asking questions about the college search generally and not specifically about Willamette. That's what we see our job as being, and we would certainly never hold against someone the idea that they're too engaged which I know has become a complicated thing in the industry.
A couple of questions. What role do test scores play in merit scholarships? You're test optional, or you never mentioned that before. Were you test optional pre-pandemic or not?
We've been test
Okay.
optional for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And really took a long time actually to get to that point. I think we knew before that we were headed that direction, but we took quite a while to study it. Our faculty really looked into it in depth to study the correlation between test scores and achievement, or test scores and lack of achievement, and found, like so many places, that there really was very little correlation. So we were pretty happy to make that decision to go test optional. It is optional, so we're not test blind. We do allow students to submit test scores if they would like to. It becomes one more credential that can only help them. So if a student submits test scores that are outside of kind of our typical range, it's not going to hurt them. But it can be one more thing that helps us just have context for who they are. And our averages, SAT is around a 1300, ACT is around a 27. So
That's a rough guideline as to whether somebody may want to submit or not. And I know it's rough. It is. I know that's a complex question, because I'm sure if it was someplace from an incredibly hard demographic to get, the averages may be a little different in different places. So
exactly.
It's always complicated.
Yeah. We have seen certainly our test optional pool grow tremendously over the course of the pandemic.
Everyone has.
Everybody has. Yeah. We used to be at about 30% test optional, and now we're well over 60% test optional. And it's just fine. It doesn't change the way we evaluate anyone at all.
Well, I've just seen the numbers. Well, I knew it was 56% for last year's class applied test optional. And so far, the early numbers for I call it class of 2022, but class of 2026 college was 52% to apply test optional. So your numbers are tracking pretty similar to national numbers, as far as that goes. So do they play a role in merit scholarships, which is on the higher ones, would you say?
If someone submits test scores that are at or above our averages, it can help bump up that merit scholarship just a little bit. If they're below our averages, they don't factor in. They're left out of the calculation.
I'm loving your transparency here, Sue. I'm asking some questions where some people squirm.
Yeah. Hey, we're all about transparency at Willamette.
Yeah, I'm loving this. Loving this. So last question that I have, and then I'll ask you if there's anything that you haven't said that you want to leave with us. Obviously, very, very few schools have the ability to be need blind. How does need aware play itself out in decisions?
Yeah, we don't. We are completely need blind in our admission decisions. We do not factor that into whether or not a student is offered admission or not.
So people usually get it one way: either they're need blind or need aware, and then how much of need you could meet is, I guess that's where you're addressing it. Is you can do what you can do through your merit offers. Do you also have any need component at all, or is 100% of the institutional money given out through the merit rubric?
No, we have need component also in the aid awarding. So outside of federal aid, we do have grants that are separate from the merit scholarship piece that are made available to students who have a need component. Now, I will say we're not at a place at Willamette where we meet 100% of demonstrated need for all students. That is a huge goal of the current, campaigns that are happening out of our advancement office. We'd love to be at that point and certainly see that as an achievable goal. And
I've told our listeners only 3% of schools are in that place financially, right. And so it really takes a lot of endowment to be able to do that. So
Yeah.
It's nice that I'm always happy that it's a goal and you're trying to work toward it.
It's a goal, yeah. But I do think the model that we currently have that we talked about before about, this tuition reset, which helps people think about our overall costs in a different way, and the aggressive merit scholarships that we offer in combination with need awards for students who, fall into those categories, it paints a really strong picture of possibility for students across the financial spectrum.
Yeah, and I think some places, like, for example, Pennsylvania, where I lived from 95 to '09, it's a place that has a very high public school tuition rate. I mean, just tuition alone at Penn State for business or Temple for business is 24 to 25,000.
Wow.
And so they're already over 40 cost of attendance in state.
Yeah.
In certain majors. And then Virginia's another state that's pretty expensive. There's a lot of these states out there that, what I'm seeing from the awards coming from you for strong students, the combination of merit and the tuition set, that it really, I think you guys can really bust a myth that we talked about obviously before, that, you're not affordable. And I know you guys are, I really love what you're doing on Price Point. And I'm finding a lot of interest in your school all across the country, not just the West Coast, not just, everything from the Northeast to the Mid-Atlantic to the Southeast. And so I think you guys have got a nice little secret sauce that you're doing there. And I can't wait to get out there and get to my Northwest 5 and visit all 5 of the schools in your consortium. I'm really excited about it.
I'm so glad you're coming. And, the students that you have that are interested, again, Willamette cares about accessibility, and we know that it can be a really hard thing, kind of regardless of where you are on the financial spectrum, to pay for visits to all of the colleges that people are thinking of. And so Willamette has a pretty robust program by which we reimburse students for coming to visit. We have a full fly-in program for students from underrepresented backgrounds that we do for admitted students in the spring. But then we also reimburse families for up to $400 to get here, regardless of who they are, what their
is that for like to attend your admitted student event?
For admitted, or just to come once admitted. It's often they use it to come to our admitted student events, which I will say are fabulous and really, really a great time to understand Willamette better. But they can just come for a daily visit too.
Wow, I did not know about that, and I have several families in mind that will be very excited to hear that. So thanks for sharing that. That's fantastic. So anyone who's admitted, they could get up to a $400 voucher to come and check out Willamette.
Yep.
Wow, and that doesn't have income caps on it.
It does not have income cap. No, anybody who chooses to come visit. Yeah, no, because the costs are overwhelming, and we want to help, and we know what a difference it makes for people to get here, to see this beautiful place, and to actually interact with our people, because that's what it's all about, right? We all know it's about that gut feeling when you walk on campus. Are these my people? Is this my place? It's so hard to know that unless you're visiting. And if we can reduce some of the burden of the cost of visiting and help people come have the sense of reassurance that they get when they get here, that's a really important investment for us.
I love things like that. It's obviously fantastic for families, and for a lot of times for families, sometimes it's not even the money. It's just the welcoming message that it sends.
Sure. Yeah.
And that, wow, I need to go check this place out. They're willing to do that for me.
Yeah.
But I also think it's really smart on your part because, in admissions, you spend a lot, right? Hotel, airfare, rent-a-car, meals, everything you do, from buying lists of names and putting together materials and postage and all the even cost of paying for staff, like, to get somebody on your campus, especially when I haven't been there yet, but I have done your video tours, and you've got a very pretty campus too.
Right.
And the show's going to show very well. And then with your warmth, I just think that's a kind of a really smart investment on your part in recruitment.
Yeah.
It's a good place to put your dollars.
I'm glad you feel that way. And I am glad that you can help us spread the word about that, because it's important to us, and we do want to make that investment, and honestly, in people making the right decision. We don't want people.
Sure.
Ultimately, we are hoping that the right number of these great students that we get to interact with choose Willamette. But part of the process is helping students understand when Willamette isn't the right choice for them as well, and visiting can help them clarify that.
And that's a thing that a lot of admission officers point out. Like when you are looking at engagement, some of it is like, okay, LTE, likely to enroll. What is the census if someone just threw us on the list and we have no shot at yield? But some of it is, do they know what they're getting into? Do they understand who we are, right? And did they give us confidence that they're going to like it here and this is what they're looking for? And so you also get that piece when you're looking at engagement, and that can help you create a better community.
Exactly. Yeah. I was having a conversation with our Vice President for Enrollment, William Mullen, just a couple of weeks ago, just after our first admitted student program. And we send all of our students, even for those big programs, into a classroom experience. We think it's really important. That's the central part of the education at Willamette. We want people to know what they're getting, just what you just said, just what they're getting into in
That's
terms
great.
of what a classroom experience feels like. And William said, so for the big programs, it's, most places don't actually put people in a class. They do that in the daily visits, but for these big programs, that's not an expectation. And I said, no, we've made it an expectation, and we're going to continue to try to do that. It's hard at a small place to find room for 250 additional students to go to class that day, but we're committed to it because it's central, and we want them while they're here. They've made the effort to get here. We've made the investment in getting here. We want them to know what the experience is going to be. So we send them to class.
This has been fantastic. And any final things that you didn't share on Willamette you want to add, or do you think we covered it?
Oh, gosh. I mean, like I said, I could go on and on and on about Willamette, but I think you got to let me say a lot of the really special things. So I just appreciate the opportunity to get to talk about this place. And I hope that, some of the folks listening will have some interest piqued and will reach out to me specifically or to us to learn a little bit more.
So let's give them your email or the best way to reach you so that they could contact directly and mention they heard you on the podcast, and we track everything. Let's track it. Let's response you get.
Absolutely. So my name is Sue Corner, Corner, and my email address is my first initial and last name, so scorner@willamette.edu. I'm really easy to find on the website. Also, I'm the only Sue in the office, so I can be easily tracked down. And our wonderful admission counselors, I have to say, we have an amazing group working in this office right now. They work sort of by territory, like a lot of offices do. So you can certainly reach out to me, or you can reach out to the counselor that's responsible for your area of the country.
And that's all on your website too. You can go on the website and see who's assigned to your region. And our regular listeners know I'm always encouraging people to touch base with their regional admission officer. So feel free to say hi to Sue, tell her you heard her on the podcast, but touch base with your regional rep too.
That would be great.
Now you have the easy name, but what's not the easy is Willamette. So you need to spell that for us, because it took me forever to drop the I. I was always doing the William.
Willamette, yeah. So it's spelled Willamette. And, we have a little joke here for how to remember how to say Willamette, because it is a hard thing for people outside of the region. Those who are from this area know, the Willamette River, the Willamette Valley. It's a common term here, but many don't know that if they're not from this region. So the way we help people remember is it's Willamette, damn it.
And the first time I heard that, it stuck with me forever.
Yep, it really.
So that actually is very effective.
Yep, it's kind of funny, kind of silly.
I was one of those people that was butchering your name all the time.
Yep. We get it all the time, and we don't hold it against people.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, the recommended resource for episode 241 is one I am really excited about. It is the website highereddatastories.com. highereddatastories.com. Now, this is the work of Jon Boeckenstadt. What he's done is he takes almost all the time iPads, federal government data, and he syncs it together with this company called Tableau, which creates these visually powerful depictions of what's going on in higher ed. And the strength is you can actually manipulate the data yourself and track various things you may want to look at, like, results in a state or results by selectivity. And so he takes cutting edge topics that are happening in higher ed, and then he lets the data show what's really going on so you can learn what is popular bluster versus truth when you're hearing about a particular topic. I can't recommend it enough. In fact, I recommend it so much that I'm actually going to be interviewing Jon in a few months and doing a deeper dive into this so that you can learn even more. But I wanted to share it with you now so that you could go on the website, fool around, explore it, so that when I actually have the interview, you'll be able to visually depict what we're talking about. Once again, the website's highereddatastories.com. Now return to my interview with Sue Corner. So before I let you go, Sue, you have to go on the hot seat. You ready?
Okay.
So the first question is, you can't be in education. What career would you pick?
I would I would somehow work in the arts. Not producing any sort of art because I have zero talent, but something working with art in a museum, curating something having to do with the arts.
There you go.
I laughed when you first asked that because really in my heart, I'm like a Broadway star and that would be a route for me. But everyone who knows me would say that is so far from realistic.
That's like the dream to be the NBA player when you.
Yeah, exactly.
I get it.
Exactly.
What's one thing on your bucket list?
Oh, work takes a lot of my time. And so my husband and I have not had a lot of opportunity to travel in the way that we would like to, between work and being the parent of a soccer player at a time.
Yeah. I know what the soccer player's like.
There's no time. So bucket list right now is to make it to Paris for our 30th wedding anniversary.
Awesome. That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
That's great. Somebody comes to Salem to visit you. What restaurant do you recommend they go to?
Oh, I'll tell you, the restaurant scene here has, as I said, has become really good. It's hard to narrow it down. For lunch, I love the Wild Pear. Super cute atmosphere, great menu.
Ooh, I like the name.
Wild Pear. I also love Taproot, and our students really love Taproot. It's uber Oregon, kind of earthy, lots of bowls, rice bowls and stuff. Really, really good. For dinner, I would actually send people not to a newer place, but to a really classic Salem place, which is called Da Vinci's. Italian, delicious.
Oh, man, you're really making me hungry. I'm very serious. You're making me hungry. You're driving a car. What's your biggest driving pet peeve?
I have a lot of driving pet peeves. My husband.
Most of us do.
The biggest one, honestly, is when people think they're being nice by like stopping to let someone in or doing something that's kind of against the flow of traffic because they think they're being helpful, but actually they're creating a dangerous situation because they're doing that. I just want everybody to go with the flow.
Cool. That's pretty awesome. Favorite television show?
I love anything having to do with murder, which sometimes people don't think that seems congruous with who I am in my day-to-day life. It actually scares my husband a little bit. But I really, really love Ozark. Have you seen Ozark?
No, our listeners know I'm kind of a very naive TV person. I have my things that I watch. I do investment stuff. I do sports, some political stuff, but every movie reference that my co-hosts make, I'm like just completely benighted.
Yeah. I love Ozark. I love Breaking Bad was an all-time favorite for me. And then nightly, we have a tradition as a family. We watch Jeopardy. We're Jeopardy nerds.
That one I know.
Yeah, we're Jeopardy nerds, and there are
My
certainly.
mom is the biggest Jeopardy nerd. She's constantly, this guy's won 17 in a row. You have to tune in. And then Dave, on a co-host, he was like a Jeopardy genius growing up as a kid. He could take his family and my family down together. So he was brilliant. So yeah, Jeopardy's kind of a family thing for us too.
Kind of fun. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I always like to close with a couple of standard ones. Best book you've read in the last 5 years, and then your advice for 3 people: students, parents, and college counselors.
Oh boy, you should have given these to me ahead of time.
No, I guess that's the fun of the. I can't call it the hot seat.
That's right.
If I give it to you at the time.
That's true.
Was it in the outline?
What's that?
It wasn't in the outline, was it?
It wasn't in the outline. I will tell you, I am. I'm a big reader. That's probably my favorite hobby, the favorite thing that I do.
So that makes it hard when I say best 5 years, doesn't it?
It makes it very hard to think about what I've read recently that I really, really like. I finished something recently, and I'm just trying to remember the title of it because I read everything on my Kindle these days, and so I don't always see the title. Oh, The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett.
What made it impactful?
I love books that are, I actually did a little presentation on this once. I love books that are escapist, entertaining, great storytelling because I really like reading to mostly be about decompression and enjoyment and not having everything always be about work and active learning. But my favorite is when I'm reading something purely for pleasure, and yet it has an underlying, through line of some sort that ends up informing my work. And The Vanishing Half is about the Black experience in America. And it involves a woman who makes a choice to, it's set back in the 50s mostly, but makes a choice to pass for white and what that ends up meaning in her life. And it's just, the characters are amazing. The questions that it raises are amazing. It's just a great story. And again, informs what I do as I think about who are our students and what is their experience in their world. It's just great. The Vanishing Half.
It's one of the most impactful books I read growing up was Black Like Me, where somebody darkened themselves to see what it was like to go through that experience and wrote about it. So that sounds fascinating. I'm gonna have to add that to my list. And thanks for sharing that. So we'll close with advice for students, parents, and college counselors.
So advice for students really for me is trust your gut instinct.
That's so important.
We can try to quantify and have checklists and be really methodical about the college search, and all of that is important. And at the same time, if your gut is telling you, I just feel like this is the right place for me, or
especially after a visit, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Especially after a visit. Yeah.
This feels right. I can see myself here. Trust that. Even if it's not what you thought it was going to be, you need to trust that and help your parents understand that that's an important thing for you to trust too. For parents, I guess the biggest piece of advice is to, parents are such big influencers in this process, even more so than they used to be through this pandemic time, as students have been separated from counselors and other support systems over the last couple of years. So parents are so important, and yet it isn't their process. It isn't ultimately where they are going to have to live and thrive. And so we have to let go enough or find that right balancing point, right? That is you are supporting, you are encouraging, and you are allowing the student to ultimately make the decision that's right for them. I think that's really,
great.
Really important.
College
And
counselors.
for college counselors, oh my gosh, the role, I don't know what we would do without college counselors on the other side of this process. I mean, we're such a team. I guess I would say have patience with us on the college side as we are working through ways to connect with their students. I know sometimes, especially for those counselors who work in the schools, we can feel like a nuisance because we want to come visit, we want to talk to students, we want to find ways, and it's hard and it's overwhelming. But I would say try to have patience with us because we really are trying to have a meaningful connection, and actually coming to the student is one of the best ways we found to do that.
So this has been awesome. I've loved it. And I intentionally let this go longer than most because you were that good. And I think that our listeners will really relate to a lot of what you're saying. And it's the first time ever that, we'll take this Willamette portion and run it over 3 episodes,
I love it.
Yeah. And because I just think I didn't want to cut you off because you were doing it. So if you could just close one last time with your email and Willamette's website.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark, so much for this opportunity. I've loved the conversation too, and I'm sorry if I rambled on too much, but like I told you at the beginning,
you didn't.
I love to talk about Willamette. My name is Sue Corner. Last name is Corner. My email address is scorner@willamette.edu, and Willamette, damn it, is spelled WILLAMETTE, and our website is just willamette.edu.
Awesome. And listeners, drop Sue a little note. Just tell her you heard it. Let her know what stood out. It's always good to get feedback, and those little things can make a person's day.
I would love that. That would be fabulous.
Any social media that you particularly think would be good for students or parents to focus in on? It can be overwhelming when everybody has everything.
Yeah, no, I love the Woo Admit, WUADMIT is our admission specific Instagram account. It's for students. Well, anyone can follow it, but our students produce it. And I think it gives you a great sense of who Willamette students are, what they're excited about. It's a good one.
Awesome. Thanks again, Sue.
Thanks, Mark.
Next week in the news, Dave and I will be discussing an article that appears in the New York Times that looks at legacy admissions. It'll be part 2 of my conversation with Lisa about what is it that keeps admission officers up at night. And we'll have a whole brand new interview. It's with John Ambrose, who's the director of undergraduate admissions at my alma mater, Michigan State University. Now, the whole interview goes about 90 minutes, so we break it up into 3 30-minute chunks. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stelianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. YCBK.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Thursday.